moment the security footage flickered onto his laptop screen, Daniel Whitmore felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. His heart dropped, heavy with a creeping sense of failure. On the screen, a young woman in a restaurant uniform stepped out of the front doors, carrying a steaming hot meal. She knelt beside a homeless man sitting hunched on the curb and gently handed it to him. The man said nothing. He simply bowed his head, accepting the food with a humility that carried more dignity than pity. It was the kind of silent gratitude that cut deeper than words. The girl smiled at him, not a smile of sympathy, but of respect. She said something, soft and unseen by the silent footage, then turned to head back inside. But before she could reach the door, another figure burst out, an older man in a manager's uniform, face flushed with fury. His arms waved sharply, his mouth clearly shouting though the video played without sound. His body language was unmistakable. Rage, accusation, command. The young woman tried to explain, her hands gesturing gently as if reaching for reason or compassion. But the manager shook his head with finality and jabbed a finger toward the parking lot. There was no negotiation, no warning, just like that. She was fired. Daniel sat motionless, pressing his fingertips against his temples as if the pain inside could be pushed away. This wasn't some random franchise across the country. This was his restaurant. One of the 9 small locations he had purchased 2 years ago when the entire chain was on the brink of collapse. It wasn't a massive corporate empire. It was a modest, personal dream, one he had poured his heart and strategy into. He had spent countless late nights reworking the menu, improving supply chains, streamlining operations. He had fought tooth and nail to revive the brand. But he had never, not once, worked a shift in the kitchen, stood behind the counter, or felt the pulse of a real lunch rush. He had optimized the business, but never touched the human core of it. And now he was watching the cost of that distance, a good employee punished for a simple act of kindness. His hand flew to the phone. He dialed Jeff, the regional manager he'd trusted to oversee day-to-day operations. "What the hell happened?" Daniel demanded, his voice low and controlled but laced with tension. "She gave away food without authorization," Jeff replied, calm and unapologetic. "It goes against company policy. We can't have employees handing out meals at their discretion. It's a liability." Daniel gritted his teeth. "So, that deserves an immediate firing? No conversation? No warning?" "The store manager made the call," Jeff said flatly. "We need structure. If we let things slide, people start taking advantage. It's a slippery slope." Daniel said nothing, not right away. He understood policies. He understood accountability, but he also understood something far more critical: human decency. A moment passed. Then another. "I'm going to that location," Daniel said, his voice now quieter, but colder. "You want me to schedule a site visit?" Jeff asked hesitantly. "No need," Daniel replied. His mind was already made up. A plan was taking shape. Underscore 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 underscore. Disclaimer: if you're concerned that this episode may contain discussion of suicide, there is a suggestion. The following morning, Daniel stepped into the restaurant not as a CEO in a sharp suit, but as a trainee, dressed in the same uniform as every other staff member. He wore a faded baseball cap pulled low and round glasses he never used. Most frontline employees had never met him, never seen him in person, and that was exactly what he was counting on. He pushed open the door. No one noticed him. The morning shift was slow, the restaurant half asleep in the quiet rhythm that comes before the daily storm. A broad-shouldered man with a clipboard, Troy, the store manager, barely glanced up from his paperwork. "You the new guy?" he grunted without looking up. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." Troy pointed vaguely toward the back. "You'll be shadowing Lisa. She knows what she's doing." Lisa. The name landed like a pin dropped into silence. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression blank. He followed instructions and walked toward the back kitchen, where he saw her, kneeling by a deep sink, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing hard. Water stained her uniform, and her hands were red from the cold. Her ponytail was messy, her movements methodical. Tired, yes, but focused, still fighting. She heard his footsteps and turned, wiping her hands on a wet dish towel. Despite her exhaustion, she offered a polite, practiced smile. "Hi," she said gently. "You must be the new hire. I'm Lisa." Daniel shook her hand, masking the storm of emotion behind his eyes. "Derek," he said, using his middle name to preserve his cover. Her apron was damp, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. But she still smiled, and that smile carried the quiet weight of someone who had been disappointed by the world too many times, yet chose to show up anyway. It wasn't just a greeting, it was resilience. Lisa pointed toward the kitchen. "First rule, never let Troy catch you standing around. He hates that." Daniel stayed quiet, trailing behind her throughout the shift. He watched her closely, every movement, every gesture. She didn't stop for a second. Her rhythm was smooth, fast, and calculated down to the smallest action. She didn't just do her own tasks well. She helped others without needing to be asked. When customers got frustrated, Lisa didn't flinch. She handled them with the steady calm of someone who'd seen it all before and learned how not to be shaken. And yet this was the person who got fired over a single act of kindness. At one point, Daniel couldn't hold back any longer. He asked, casually but carefully, "I heard someone got fired recently. What happened?" Lisa stiffened slightly. She didn't meet his eyes. Her focus stayed on the register screen. "It was me." Daniel acted surprised. "You? You got fired?" She nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. "There was this homeless man who came in asking for water. He didn't beg, didn't bother anyone. He just looked completely worn out, so I gave him some food too. Next thing I know, Troy's yelling at me in front of everyone, and then I'm out. No warning, no chance to explain." Daniel furrowed his brow, trying to rein in the anger rising in his chest. "It's messed up." Lisa exhaled, her gaze drifting toward something far beyond the walls of the restaurant. "I get that there are rules, but in that moment, ignoring someone who's starving, I couldn't do it." Before Daniel could respond, Troy's voice cracked sharply from the back. "Lisa, what the hell are you doing here?" Lisa straightened, her voice firm but not confrontational. "Covering a shift. You're short today." Daniel noticed the way Troy's face twisted in irritation. "That's not your call. You don't work here anymore." Lisa's jaw tightened. "You fired me on the spot. No questions, no warning." Troy gave a bitter laugh. "You handed out free food. That's theft." Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Theft?" he repeated, his voice steady, though shock showed in his eyes. "He gave a meal to someone in need." Troy spun toward him, eyes narrowing. "Big talk for the new guy. You got something to say?" Daniel held his gaze, refusing to look away. But he said nothing. For now. He wasn't done observing. Not yet. Lisa kept her voice even. "I'm just here to help. You're down 2 people, and we both know how insane the lunch rush gets." Troy rolled his eyes. "Fine. Finish the shift, but don't expect to be hired back." Daniel watched as Lisa silently turned back to her tasks. Her face was blank, unreadable, but he saw the truth. She was swallowing her pride, her pain, her sense of injustice. She wore it like armor. The restaurant was chaos. Orders lagged. Customers grew impatient. Staff ran around trying to keep up. And Troy? He strutted like he was doing Lisa a favor, not even acknowledging the storm around him. Throughout the rest of the shift, Daniel saw more than any security camera ever could. Employees were overworked, overstressed, and undervalued. Not once did Troy lend a hand. He just barked orders and shifted blame. When customers complained, it was the cashiers who got the heat, not the system that failed them. By the end of the day, Daniel didn't just suspect what the problem was. He knew. Tomorrow, things would begin to change. The next morning, Daniel arrived before the restaurant opened. The air still carried the stale scent of grease from the night before. The flickering overhead lights buzzed with fatigue, as if the building itself was exhausted. He stepped inside and joined the prep work without a word. Lisa wasn't there. He hadn't expected her to be, not after yesterday. She had every reason to walk away. Troy, on the other hand, was exactly the same, clipboard in hand, scowl on his face like the world owed him something. Daniel moved quietly to the prep station. It had been a while since he worked behind the line, but muscle memory took over. His hands moved with purpose, eyes alert, ears wide open. Nearby, a younger employee muttered while pulling out a frozen pastry tray. Another day with Troy breathing down our necks. Daniel leaned in slightly. "He've always like this?" The kid smirked. "Worse when upper management isn't around. Guy does nothing, just yells whenever something goes wrong." Another worker, maybe in her 30s, chimed in while wiping a counter. "He cut our hours last month, still expects the same workload. You speak up, he threatens to replace you." Daniel nodded slowly. His face remained neutral, but inside, his frustration burned hotter by the minute. Jeff had handed Troy the keys, and Troy had turned this place into a personal kingdom. Then came the lunch rush, fast and relentless. Orders piled up, machines ran hot. Daniel dove in, working shoulder to shoulder with the staff, flipping burgers and sliding trays like he'd never left the line. A customer requested fresh fries. The fryer was already overloaded, but Daniel saw the gap and dropped a new basket without hesitation. Troy spotted him immediately. His face darkened, and he stormed over. "Hey, who told you to do that?" Daniel wiped his hands on his apron, calm and collected. "Customer asked for a fresh batch." "That's not how we do things here," Troy snapped. "You do that every time we waste product." Daniel met his eyes. "Or we keep customers happy." Troy's jaw clenched. "You don't run this place, I do." Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. The way Troy said it said everything. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about power. After the rush, Daniel sat near the back, catching his breath, watching the team. They were good, disciplined, fast, trying their best but exhausted. Some whispered among themselves, quiet but clearly fed up. Then the door opened. Lisa walked in. She wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a t-shirt. She paused near the entrance, hesitating for just a second before approaching a cashier. Daniel moved a little closer, pretending to wipe a nearby counter. "I left my paycheck here," Lisa said quietly. "Troy never gave it to me." The cashier looked at her with sympathy. "He said he was holding on to it, but honestly, I'm not sure if he still has it." Lisa sighed, the breath heavy with resignation. "Figures." Before she could say anything else, Troy emerged from the office. His face tightened the moment he saw her, like she had trespassed on territory that no longer belonged to her. His eyes narrowed, voice low and sharp. "What the hell are you doing here?" Lisa stood straighter, shoulders trembling ever so slightly, but her eyes held steady. "I came to get my paycheck." Troy crossed his arms, feigning indifference. "I'll mail it." Lisa didn't budge. "You had it in your hand yesterday." "I don't have time for this." Troy turned his back, dismissing the conversation like it wasn't worth a second more. Nearby, Daniel gently laid his cleaning rag on the counter. It was time. He couldn't stay in the shadows a moment longer. He stepped forward, voice low but unwavering, like a quiet gavel striking. "Actually, Troy, I think you do have time." Troy spun around, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Daniel slowly removed his cap. Then he took off his glasses. The room fell silent, still, as if everyone had stopped breathing at once. A few employees looked up, and recognition rippled through the kitchen like a sudden gust of wind. Troy's face went pale. "Wait, he stammered. Daniel didn't give him the chance. "I'm Daniel Whitmore. I own this restaurant chain, and for the last 2 days, I've watched firsthand as you've run this place into the ground." No one said a word. The silence was sharp, charged with disbelief, anticipation, and quiet vindication. It thudded like a drum inside every chest. Troy tried to compose himself, standing straighter, adjusting his stance, but even his voice betrayed him. I know it might have looked—" "No," Daniel cut him off. His eyes never left Troy. "I've heard enough. I saw you fire an employee for showing basic human kindness. I watched you belittle your staff, cut their hours while demanding impossible performance. I watched you ignore customer experience just to protect a petty sense of control." Troy opened his mouth, but no words came. Daniel turned to Lisa, his expression softening. "If you still want this job, it's yours." Lisa blinked, clearly stunned. "I do, yes." Daniel nodded, then he faced Troy again, this time without hesitation. "As for you, your time here is over." Troy's face turned red, his hands clenched into fists. "You can't just—" "I can," Daniel replied calmly, "and I am." For the first time since Daniel had entered the building, Troy looked lost. He glanced around the room, expecting someone, anyone, to back him up, but there was no one, just tired, silent faces and eyes that no longer feared him. Daniel stepped forward, speaking to the room. "I should have been here a long time ago. That's on me, but from today forward, everything changes." No applause, just a few slow nods. A shift in posture, a flicker in their eyes. Hope. Something they hadn't felt here in a long time. Troy finally seemed to understand. It was over. He grabbed his clipboard, muttering under his breath, and stormed toward the exit. The door slammed behind him with finality, like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. Daniel exhaled deeply. He hadn't come just to see the damage. He had come to rebuild. And the moment Troy walked out, the air itself seemed to shift. The thick tension that had hung like smoke in the restaurant began to lift. Employees exchanged quiet, uncertain glances, uncertain but lighter. Lisa stood by the counter, still processing what had just happened. Daniel let the silence settle for a few seconds. Then he spoke again. "I know this all feels sudden, but let's be clear. This restaurant won't be run the way Troy ran it. We start fresh. Today." Some people still looked wary, but others straightened their backs. You could feel it, the weight starting to lift. Daniel looked to Lisa. "First order of business. I want you back on payroll today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today." Then he turned to the rest of the team. "If anyone else had their hours unfairly cut, I want to hear about it." The cashier who had spoken with Lisa earlier stepped forward, hesitantly. "Last month, Troy cut my hours. I asked why and he said I wasn't efficient enough, but I've never had a single customer complaint." Another young employee nodded. "Same here," he said. "I had to earn full hours again, even though I was already working double shifts." Daniel's lips pressed together. It was worse than he thought. "That stops now," he said firmly. "No one gets their hours cut because of favoritism or personal bias. Schedules will be based on actual business needs. Period." A quiet wave of agreement passed through the team. No clapping, no cheering. Just eye contact, real, meaningful eye contact that said, "We're with you." Daniel glanced at the clock. Lunch rush is coming. We've got work to do, but after this shift, I want to hear every idea you have about how to fix this place. Lisa stepped forward, tying her apron back on. I'll handle prep. We're out of diced onions, and the stockroom's a mess. Troy never let us reorganize it. Daniel didn't need to ask why. A messy stockroom made it easier to blame others. "Cleaned today," he said. "We clean it up." For the next few hours, Daniel worked side by side with his staff. At first they were tentative, unsure how long this change would last, but slowly something shifted. The workers, who once moved like machines, began to communicate. They coordinated better, orders came out faster, conversations flowed. Then came the real test. A man entered the restaurant, older, with weathered skin and worn-out clothes. His hands were rough. He hovered by the counter, eyes scanning the menu, then dipping into his coat pocket. Daniel noticed. So did Lisa. She walked up to the counter, not with pity, but with warmth. "Hi, sir, what can I get you today?" The man hesitated. "Wanted a coffee, nothing else." Lisa smiled. "Coming right up." Daniel stepped in beside her, his voice calm. "And lunch is on us today." The man's eyes widened. "No catch," Daniel said. "Just a meal, on the house." Lisa didn't hesitate. She printed the receipt and handed it to him. $0, 0 cents. The man swallowed hard, nodded a quiet thank you, and stepped aside to wait for his food. Daniel turned to Lisa. "From now on, if someone truly needs help, we help them. No one gets fired for doing the right thing." Lisa gave a small nod. Her face was steady, but in her eyes Daniel saw something he hadn't seen before. Belief. The shift ended as the sun dipped low behind the restaurant's glass windows. The whole team was worn out, but this time, it wasn't the kind of fatigue that left you bitter. This was earned exhaustion, the kind that came after a day of real, meaningful work. And more than that, it was the very first step in reviving a place that had long been ruled by fear. Daniel wiped his hands and turned to face the entire team. No longer just employees in his eyes, but individuals he now saw with fresh clarity. "All right," he said. "Let's have an honest conversation." He stood in the center of the kitchen, the harsh white light above highlighting the tired determination on his face. A few team members sat on stools, others leaned against counters, gloves still on, watching him. Lisa stood with her arms crossed, expression serious, not resistant, but not fully trusting yet either. She was waiting to see what kind of leader Daniel was really going to be. He took a deep breath. "I need to know everything, not just about Troy, but how this restaurant really runs, what works, what doesn't. Be honest with me." A pause hung in the air. Then an older woman finally spoke. "We're constantly short-staffed. Troy always said payroll costs were too high to hire more people, but that just made every shift feel like a sprint we were never going to finish." The cashier chimed in, her voice dry. "When it gets busy, we don't get breaks. Legally, we should, but Troy would say, take it when you can. Problem is, we never can." Another team member added, glancing around to make sure no one would stop him. "The equipment's falling apart. The fryer leaks oil. The soda machine's been malfunctioning for months. Troy said if it's not completely broken, it doesn't need fixing." Daniel said nothing. He listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend. He just let it all come out, like a dam finally breaking. Words no one had ever asked for, stories no one had ever cared to hear. When it was done, he nodded slowly. "Okay, here's the plan. First, staffing adjustments. We're going to bring more people on so no one has to carry 2 jobs on their shoulders. Second, breaks will be enforced, no exceptions. Third, I've already called in a maintenance crew. They'll be here this week to fix every broken piece of equipment." The employees exchanged looks of disbelief, as if they couldn't believe someone was not just listening but actually doing something about it. Lisa studied him carefully. "What about management?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze. "I'm not leaving until the right person is in place to lead this restaurant." Lisa didn't respond right away. She blinked once, then slowly said, "If you want someone who actually cares about this team, there's a guy named Mark at the other location. He used to work here until Troy pushed him out. He knows how to run things right." Daniel filed the name away in his mind. "I'll call him." Then, after a brief pause, he added, "And Lisa, if you've ever considered taking on a management role, I'd love to talk about that with you too." She froze slightly, like the idea had never once crossed her mind. I've never really thought about it." "No pressure," Daniel said with a small smile. "Just something to think about." Lisa nodded softly. But in her eyes, something shifted. A spark. A realization that she mattered, that she had value. Daniel looked around the kitchen. Just yesterday, this place had been smothered by tension and hopelessness. And now? "This is just the beginning," he said. "But if we do this right, this will become a place people want to work, and a place customers want to come back to." For the first time since he'd walked in, Daniel saw something in their expressions. Hope. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than the first shift. The air outside was crisp, the sky still tinged with that pale gray light of early dawn. He stood at the front of the restaurant, watching as employees arrived one by one. Some approached cautiously, others carried a flicker of hope, but none of them knew yet if yesterday's change was real or just another empty promise. Inside, the kitchen was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of appliances warming up. Lisa was already there, tying on her apron. She looked up at Daniel briefly, nodded once, and went back to prepping, as if yesterday had been some surreal dream. But her hands moved efficiently, her eyes were focused, and her shoulders no longer sagged under invisible weight. Daniel checked his phone, a message from Jeff. He hadn't told him the full story yet. That conversation would come soon. But not now. Not while there was a promise to keep, to the staff, the business, and to himself. 20 minutes later, the maintenance crew arrived. Toolboxes clanked, replacement parts rolled in on carts. One technician walked up to Daniel with a clipboard to confirm the list. The fryer, the soda machine, and the oven's thermostat were all scheduled for repair today. The employees watched, some exchanging glances. Was this really happening? While the technicians worked, Daniel stepped into Troy's old office. It looked exactly as he had imagined, cluttered and cold. Papers crammed into drawers, sticky notes with barely legible scribbles stuck to every surface, and the bitter scent of stale coffee hung in the air. He sat down and began sorting through employee records. The schedules were a mess. Hours were cut without explanation. Some names had been crossed out with no notes. Others were marked underperforming, without a single report to back it up. He began drafting a list of people whose records needed to be reviewed. By midday, he picked up the phone and called Mark, the person Lisa had mentioned. Mark's voice was cautious but professional. Daniel wasted no time and got straight to it, asking about his history with the restaurant, his time before Troy arrived, and what led to his departure. Mark was honest. He'd started as a line cook, worked his way up, but when Troy came in with his rigid management style, Mark had been pushed out. They called it a difference in leadership philosophy, he said. Daniel asked, "If I told you things were different now, would you come back?" There was a long pause. Then Mark said, "If it's truly different, I'll be there tomorrow." Back in the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted. No more anxious glances, no more hushed complaints. The staff worked with each other, not just beside each other. Lisa had naturally stepped into a leadership role, guiding new hires, streamlining prep, and cleaning up the stockroom. No one asked her to do it. She just did. When the lunch rush hit, Daniel rolled up his sleeves. He helped at the grill, ran food, jumped in where needed. Orders flowed out smoothly. Customers noticed. A few even commented. Something's different about this place today, in a good way. After the rush, Daniel pulled Lisa aside. "Mark's coming in tomorrow," he said. "He'll be stepping in as manager." Lisa nodded slowly. "You sure he's the right choice?" "And has the experience. More importantly, he has the respect of this team." Daniel paused, then added, "And if you're still interested in management down the road, I'll be here to support you." Lisa didn't answer right away. She simply said softly, "I just want to see where things go first." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the maintenance crew finished their work. The fryer no longer leaked. The soda machine worked flawlessly. The oven held temperature evenly. But more important than any of that, the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. Temperatures were calibrated. Staff tested the equipment, nodding in quiet approval. Small victories, yes, but meaningful ones. Not just fixing machines, but restoring a sense of trust that had long been fractured. Before leaving, Daniel gathered the team one more time. Gone was the stern tone. Gone was the tension. This wasn't a CEO giving orders. It was a man, worn but honest, standing before people he once took for granted. "This is just the beginning," Daniel said. "From now on, every voice in this room matters. Policies will still be followed, but they will never again be used as weapons. If you speak the truth, you won't be punished. You'll be heard." Some employees still looked cautious, but in their body language, Daniel saw something new. A little hope. A little trust. As he stepped out of the restaurant that night, the cool evening air brushed his shoulders. He knew the work wasn't done. Changing a company culture doesn't happen in a few days. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt certain that this place, his place, was finally heading in the right direction. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than usual. The sky was still tinged with soft gray, the chill in the air lingering from the night before. He stood in front of the restaurant for a moment, watching the staff arrive. Some offering cautious smiles, others still unsure if yesterday's promises would actually hold. Inside, the kitchen was still quiet, that special kind of silence that only exists before the day's chaos begins. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint warmth of machines just starting to hum. Lisa was already there. She was organizing supplies, focused, calm. When she saw Daniel, she gave a subtle nod, then returned to her work. Not distant, just thoughtful. A few minutes later, Mark walked in. He was taller than Daniel had expected, with a solid build and a quiet presence. His eyes scanned the space with the ease of someone who had worked in kitchens long enough to read a room by the way it breathed. His gaze wasn't judgmental, it was intuitive. That Daniel respected. The two of them stepped into Troy's old office. Daniel closed the door behind them. Mark didn't waste time. "Lisa told me Troy ran this place into the ground." Daniel leaned back against the desk. "She wasn't wrong." Mark looked around the cluttered office, the disorganized papers, the messy notes, the stale smell of neglect. Before Troy showed up, things weren't perfect, but at least it worked. Then one day, I was told I no longer aligned with company direction. Next day, I was out. Daniel nodded. "This won't happen again. I'm giving you full autonomy. No micromanaging, no pointless top-down rules. Just make this a place people want to work." Mark studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I can work with that." Back in the kitchen, the morning shift had begun. Lisa was training a new employee, showing them how to prep orders. When she saw Mark, she paused briefly, then offered a nod. "Didn't think I'd see you back here." Mark gave a slight smile. I didn't think so either, but here we are. Daniel stepped back and simply observed. There was no closeness between them, but there was history, professional, unspoken. Lisa still kept her guard up, but she wasn't rejecting Mark's return. And to Daniel, that was a good sign. The first wave of customers began trickling in. Daniel watched how Mark moved. No shouting, no barking orders. He asked questions. He made adjustments on the fly without throwing anyone off balance. When a small issue occurred, a mistake at the register that delayed an order, Mark didn't scold. He walked over, gently corrected the cashier, and walked them through it step by step, calm and respectful. Lisa noticed. She didn't say a word, but Daniel saw it. Her posture changed. She was watching Mark differently now. After the lunch rush, Mark pulled Daniel aside. Exercise program. I can turn this place around, he said. But I need to know one thing. What happens when corporate pressure creeps back in? What if they don't like how I'm running things? Daniel didn't hesitate. Then corporate changes, not you. Mark gave a short nod. That was enough, for now. For the rest of the day, Daniel focused on the little things. He adjusted shift schedules, checked that all the prepared equipment was holding up, made sure no one was carrying more than they should. Small steps, but together they were starting to add up. By late afternoon, Lisa approached him. I've been thinking about what you said about management. Daniel turned to her, waiting. I don't know if I want it long-term, she said. But I do know this place needs someone who actually cares, and if that means stepping up, then I'm willing to try. Daniel nodded. That's all I needed to hear. Lisa gave a quiet nod in return, then turned back to her work. As Daniel stepped out of the restaurant again, the sky had turned golden. He took a deep breath. The air was crisp. The work wasn't over. It never would be. Because culture isn't something you fix overnight. What, today? Today, for the first time, he truly believed this place was moving toward the light.